Hey guys, what's up? This is AJ. Welcome back to another video. Hope you're doing good. In this video, we are gonna make our enemy characters move around to random positions that we generate. Like we are gonna generate random waypoints, and we are gonna make our enemies move towards that waypoint. Then we are gonna make the enemy come back to the original starting position where they were in when the game began. Then we are gonna generate a new random point and make them move towards that point or within a certain range from the initial position of the enemy. And we still don't have set up a animator for the enemies, so this is kind of something what you're gonna see at the end of this video. But setting up the animator is kind of easy, and we can do it in the next video. Without further ado, let's get started. So guys, first thing you want to do is go to Windows and AI navigation. So you get this tab over here. Then we are gonna select the terrain that we have, and then we are gonna get this section: navigation static, generate off mesh links, and navigation area walkable. So now if we go to bake and hit bake, okay, we are gonna need to switch on gizmos on here, and you'll get a blue region, highlighted region. So this is kind of the area where we can make the character move around. So if you see here on this hill that we got some gray area. That's going to be an area that the character is not going to be able to walk around on. You can adjust these radius, height, everything to set up the place you want the characters to move around. I'm just going to leave it as is. Now I have created a empty game object called enemies and childed all the enemies to it. I have kind of renamed all the enemies as enemy01 and childed it to the empty game object. If you see the enemy prefab, I have added a navmesh agent to the enemy character. So this is what gonna help us move around in the navmesh. So this is gonna be something that makes the character walkable on its own. And I have kind of adjusted the speed, angular speed, acceleration, all these values. So if you want, you can use my values, or you can come up with your own values, or do as you like. And for the radius, I have set it to 0.15. So if you look closely here, you got a cylinder. So that's the navmesh agent, and the radius is going to be the cylinder's base radius, and the height is going to be the height of this cylinder. Then the speed is going to be the speed with which the character moves around in the navmesh. Angular speed is going to be the speed with which the character turns if we want to move around in a different direction. And acceleration is going to be the acceleration with which the character is going to move around. Pretty basic stuff. Now I'm going to go to the scripts folder, enemies, and create a new C# script called enemy mover. Yeah, let's open this up. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go to the enemy controller and create an instance of the enemy mover, because we are going to be needing that. It's called this em, and I'm going to set em as get component enemy mover. Now let's go to the enemy mover itself, and here we are gonna need some fields. So let's first create a boolean, and this is just gonna be is patrolling, which indicates if the character is patrolling or not. And let's add a method. Okay, first I'm just gonna set it to true as a default, and now let's add a method to reset this value from the enemy controller. Like if the enemy has locked onto a target, we don't want the enemy to be still patrolling. We want the enemy to do something else, like chase the target or attack the target. So here, if target is locked, then we are going to say em dot call the method we are creating now and reset is patrolling to false. So this is going to be public, and let's set it as is patrolling. Let's say we pass in a boolean is patrolling, and this dot is patrolling equals is patrolling. Now let's go to enemy controller, call this method when the enemy has logged onto a target. So is patrolling, and we just need to pass in false. If the enemy has moved on from a target, then we need to set the value again. So here we're going to say em dot is patrolling true. Now here in the update method, we are going to check if the field is patrolling is true, and if it is true, then we want the character to be patrolling. So I'm just going to create a method for that and call it patrol behavior. Let's hit alt enter. Generate method. We can delete this line. Now we are going to need a instance of the NavMesh agent. Let's call it NavMesh agent. And for adding NavMesh agent, we are going to need to use Unity engine.ai. And I'm going to set NavMesh agent to get component NavMesh agent in start. Now we are going to need two vector3 variables to get the original position of the enemy when the game begins, and to have a random position, to generate a random position for the enemy to move towards when it is patrolling. So we are going to be changing this random position from time to time. We are actually going to generate a random position and make the enemy move from the original position to the random position, then come back to the original position, then get a new random position, move to that, then come back to original position, and so on. So I'm just going to say vector3, or let's just make it serialized field vector3 original position and random position, and in start we are going to set them both to transform dot position. Now in patrol behavior, the first thing we are going to check is if the player has reached a waypoint or not. So we are going to use a method for that, and let's call it at waypoint. So if the character is at a waypoint, we are going to do something like generating a new waypoint for the character to move towards. So let's hit alt enter. Generate method at waypoint. So one thing about using NavMesh agent is we can't expect the NavMesh agent on the character to be very precise. So we are gonna have a small offset value so that we can tolerate a small difference in the position that the character is supposed to move towards and the character is at. So I'm just gonna add a float. Let's make it serialized field, and this is gonna be waypoint tolerance. And we need a float variable to know the distance from the waypoint, like how much distance the character is away from the waypoint. So I'm just gonna set a waypoint tolerance to 1 as a default, and let's say we add another field called distance to waypoint, and let's maybe rename the random position to random waypoint. Okay, now we go here. We can say distance to waypoint equals vector3 dot distance transform dot position comma random waypoint, and this is going to be calculating the distance of the character from the random waypoint that we want the character to move towards. I'm just going to rename it with a small v. Okay, now here we are going to return distance to waypoint less than or equal to waypoint tolerance. So if this is true, that is, if the distance to the waypoint is less than or equal to the waypoint tolerance, we know that the character is almost near to the waypoint it is supposed to reach towards, and that's all we need to generate a new waypoint for the character to move towards. So let's do that now. Okay, when I said we are going to make random waypoints for the character to move towards, I meant creating random waypoints but within a range so that it is near to the original version, but I mean so that it is not too far from the original version, because right now if we go to our terrain, it doesn't got any walls and all, so we don't want the character to move so far and fall off the terrain and things like that. So to set those boundaries, we are gonna add two variables of float, so x max and set max, and x max means this is the maximum length it is gonna move away from the original position on the x-axis, and same with the z-axis. We are not going to be changing the y-axis because you know why. So, and in this case I'm just gonna set it to 10 f for both, and you can use whatever value you feel like. Oh, like how much ever you want the character to move away from the initial position, so that's up to you. Now here, if the character is at a waypoint, there are two conditions. Like it could be at a random waypoint or it could be at the original position. So to check that, I'm gonna need another float. Let's say distance from original position, and we are going to be setting this up in the update. So distance from original position is going to be vector3 dot distance transform dot position comma original position. So if this is less than a small tolerance value, just like we have here waypoint tolerance value as 1f, but I'm not going to add a new variable for that. I'm just going to give it like this. So distance from original position less than or equal to 1f, then we know that the character is almost close to the original position, and that's when we want to create a new random waypoint for the character to move towards. So I'm just going to create a range between which the character can move. I mean, get a value from the range between which the character can move. So I'm just going to call it x point for the x-axis and z point for the z-axis, and x point is just going to be random dot range, and for using random we gotta add a new library, and that's unity engine.random. So let's add that, and we don't need using system in this script, so I'm just gonna delete that, and we're gonna get an error if we had the unit using system, because system also has a random class in it. So here we are gonna say the random ranges between x max, negative x max and x max. So that's -10 and 10. And for the set point, let's just copy this, paste it here, change it to set and set. So we can't really use the x point and set point as is, because x point and z point are gonna be depending on the origin, which is 0 0 0, and the character can be if you check this character, this is at 11 0 0, but this could even be somewhere around to 18, or yeah, like this. Then what would happen if we have a character over at 218 0 107 is that we're going to make this character move all the way across to something within the range of -10 to 10 on z and x axis. So we don't want to do that. We want to make the character move within a range of its original position, just by tweaking a little bit of the x and z axis of its original position. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the character's original position and add that with the x point and z point that we get. So like if we get a random value of 5 for the x, and for, let's say 5 for z as well, for simplicity, then we're going to make the character move to 223 on the x-axis and 112 on the z-axis. Now that's more reasonable than making the character move from 218 to 5 on x-axis and 107 to 5 on z-axis. So that's what we are gonna do here. And I'm just gonna add a little field over here called offset, so that we can actually control the range with which we want to change the new random position. And I'm just going to set it to 3f as a default, but we can change it in the Unity editor if you want to. So here I'm just going to use ternary operator. Let's say x point equals x point less than 0. So another thing we want to do is, if the x point is a negative value, then we want to add a negative offset. If it is a positive value, we want to add a positive offset. So here, let's say less than 0. Transform dot position dot x plus x point minus offset, else you just do the same thing, but here it's going to be plus offset. And let's just repeat this for z-axis. Now we can use the x point and z point to create a random waypoint. So let's say random waypoint equals new vector 3 x point comma transform dot position dot y comma z point. And here, this is when we are close to the original position. So if we are not close to the original position, that is if we are at a random position that we generated here, then we want to move back to the original position. And in that case, we are just going to set random waypoint equals original position. Now we don't want to make our enemy move towards the waypoint, then push back to the original position, then move towards the next waypoint. We want enemy to stay at each waypoint for a little bit of time. So let's add a field to that, and this is going to be called time since arrived at waypoint. Time since arrived at waypoint, and I'm going to set it to method dot infinity. Another field called waypoint dwell time. I'm just going to set it to 5f as a default. So the character is going to spend 5 seconds at each waypoint before returning to the original waypoint or moving towards the next waypoint. So the way that we can do that is, if we know the character is at a waypoint, then we can set the time since arrived at waypoint to 0. Then in update, we are gonna increment the time since arrived at waypoint with the time dot delta time. And when the character has reached a waypoint, then we are gonna set the navmesh agent dot. We are just gonna disable the navmesh agent. So navmesh agent dot enable equal to false. We are gonna check if time since arrived at waypoint is greater than the waypoint delta time, that is 5 seconds. And if it is so, then we need to move towards the next waypoint. So we are going to first set the navmesh agent to enable. So it's going to be true over here, and then we can use navmesh agent to dot set destination to the random waypoint. So what is going to happen when we hit play is it's going to come here, record behavior. It's going to check at waypoint or not, and it is going to come here, and it is going to calculate the distance to waypoint. And since we have set up the random waypoint to be the transform dot position at start, the random waypoint is going to be the position of the character when the game begins, and we are going to get a value almost equal to 0. So that's going to be less than waypoint tolerance value, which is 1. So we are going to come in here. Then we are going to set the time since arrived at waypoint to 0. And since it is 0, it is going to go here when the frame is updated next. And in the meanwhile, it is also going to get a random waypoint to move towards once the time since arrived at waypoint passes the waypoint dwell time, because it is getting updated over here in the update method. It's gonna set the navmesh agent to be enabled and move towards that random waypoint. Then once it reaches that waypoint, it is gonna again check the at waypoint method, where the random waypoint now is the new waypoint that we created here. Created here. So once the character is almost near that waypoint, considering the tolerance value, it is gonna return true, and then we are gonna set the random waypoint to the original position again, coming here in the else. And this is just gonna go on and on until the player comes within range of the enemy. But that's something we gotta work on next in future. But right now we got another problem to take care of. That is, there could be situations where some obstacle comes in front of the enemy, and the enemy is not able to move towards the waypoint it is supposed to move towards. And in that case, we are going to need to have a time with which the character or the enemy needs to be able to move, get to that next waypoint. And if that time is crossed, we are going to need to set a new waypoint for the enemy to move towards. So let's see how we can do that. And that is pretty simple, actually. It's the same as we did with time since arrived at waypoint and waypoint dwell time. So here we are going to add 2 new fields. Let's call it waypoint move time. Set it to method dot infinity, and time to reach waypoint. and I'm just gonna set it as 30F as a default value. Now we are gonna be needing to use this waypoint move time. So right here where we set the time since arrived at waypoint to 0, we are also gonna set waypoint move time to 0, and here where we update the time since arrived at waypoint, we are gonna update waypoint move time as well. Or let's just make a method called update timers to do that. So I'm just gonna cut this from here, paste it over here, void update timers, and I'm gonna call this in update method. Here where we check if the character is at a waypoint, I'm gonna add another condition, or waypoint move time is greater than time to reach waypoint. And that's kind of pretty much all we need to do for the character, for the enemy character to be moving around in random waypoints. So let's just hit play and check this out in Unity. Now back in Unity, I have added the enemy mover script to the enemy prefab, and maybe let's just set the acceleration to 2 and speed. Let's let the speed just be 1. So I'm just gonna hit play and see if this works out. So we can go to here, and you know that we got an enemy over here, and that's our enemy, this enemy, and we can see that the nav mesh agent is off and the target is locked on. That's because we are in, that's because the player is in range of the enemy, and we can also see that the other enemy characters are moving around. So if you check this enemy, it's gonna move to a waypoint. Okay, wait there for a short amount of time, then move towards another of the original waypoint. And if you see here, this enemy is gonna look at the character as long as it is in player character, as long as it is in range of the enemy. Now we move away, we can see that the on this enemy, the target locked has gone to false, and it is now started patrolling around. Now the is patrolling. Yeah, if you check here, is patrolling is true in that enemy. Okay, I didn't expand it before. So if you go near the enemy, you can see that is patrolling is gonna go off, and the target locked is gonna be on. Nav mesh agent is gonna be disabled. That might be because the enemy is at a waypoint rusting. But anyways, yeah, now the nav mesh is back on. Target locked is false, and the is patrolling is true. So everything's working as it's supposed to right now. And that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Hope you liked it. If you did, give me a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. That would really be helping me out. Until next time, see you. Bye.